Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. We're your hosts, Em and Jay.
Hi.
And today the two of us are talking about episode 7 of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. This is the first episode in a while where we don't meet a new princess to join the rebellion. We do meet a character from the original, Castaspella, although she's probably the most far removed from the original.
She's basically just named after a character from the original, rather than actually being a proper reboot of that character.
In the original, Castaspella was a queen, and she ruled Mystacor. Here, she's the head sorceress, so she does still have some kind of authority, but she's definitely been knocked down.
She's also Glimmer's aunt on her father's side, so that's an interesting choice.
I feel like if they told me this character design's name was Spellseeker or something, I probably would have believed it. There's really nothing about this character that says Castaspella at all. It's not that it's a bad character design, it's just another one of those things that makes me feel like I don't know if this is really a reboot as much as it's just a story with like a She-Ra skin on it.
Honestly, her hair reminds me of Snoopy, but that's just my opinion. The episode begins with our trio sleeping in the middle of the Whispering Woods. It doesn't say outright, but I think they just haven't made it back to Bright Moon from drill yet.
Adora thinks she hears something, so she ends up keeping watch all night. Bo and Glimmer sleep through the rest of the night without much trouble, and they see that Adora is keeping watch. Bo asks her what's got her attention, and Adora says that she thought she heard something, and Glimmer's really dismissive of it. She asks Adora if she saw a bunny or a butterfly. I don't know why she's being so dismissive. I mean, they met Adora in the Whispering Woods. Adora knows that Catra's been in there.
Yeah, and when they met Adora, she was originally part of the Horde, and she was their enemy. So it isn't hard to believe that the Horde could be there.
But Glimmer decides that Adora is just stressed out because of what happened to her back at Drill. So she suggests that they should all go to Mystacor, which Bo is very excited about. But Adora doesn't know Mystacor, so they explain that Mystacor is the safest place in Etheria because it has an invisibility spell protecting it,
so the Horde can't find it.
It's where all of Etheria's sorcerers live, and there's a lot of really relaxing things there, like pools and healing springs, and it's the perfect place for them to relax. Adora's kind of skeptical because she's not used to relaxing since she grew up in the Horde, but Bo tells her that they'll change all that. As they walk off, we see that they're being followed by one of Shadow Weaver's shadow spies. Back in episode 5, Catra told She-Ra that it wasn't that easy to escape the Horde, and she did ask Catra how she found her, so she must know that she's being followed.
She probably knows that something's wrong.
I didn't like how Glimmer was so dismissive immediately. At least Bo was kind of trying to see what might be out there. Glimmer didn't even seem to think it was a possibility.
And even though they're going to Mystacor, which is seemingly protected, it doesn't change the fact that something could easily follow them to Mystacor, and then it would no longer be safe.
Or that there might be something in the woods. They weren't there when Catra told She-Ra that it wasn't that easy to escape the Horde. But they do know that the Horde has gone into the Whispering Woods before. At least Catra and Adora did. And they ran into Adora there in the woods, so it doesn't seem like it crosses Glimmer or Bo's mind that
this is a very real possibility.
That the Horde might actually be after Adora. I mean, she is a deserter. Back in the Fright Zone, Shadow Weaver calls Catra and tells her that her shadow spies have found Adora again. Catra assumes that Shadow Weaver is sending her on another Adora mission, but it turns out she just wants Catra to watch the door for her because she's planning on dealing with Adora herself. One of those, if you want something done right, you better do it yourselves situation.
Shadow Weaver's aware that she's going behind Hordak's back doing this. Hordak was very clear that he does not want her to go after Adora. He doesn't care about her at all. Yet, Shadow Weaver's a complete opposite, where she has a single-minded focus of getting Adora back, to the point where she's willing to undermine authority, waste the Horde's resources and energy and time, and also she's forcing Catra to just watch the door, which is a huge waste of your force captain.
The Horde is not on the same page. Hordak doesn't understand the problem problem that having a deserter is actually causing, because she knows all of their secrets, the ins and outs of how they operate, and how to use that knowledge against them. And Shadow Weaver is so focused on getting Adora back that she's hurting the Horde by wasting their resources and wasting the time of one of their force captains.
It really is a shame because the Horde could be a very interesting and threatening presence, but they're just a joke.
The Horde can't possibly succeed. They don't have the same goals. They don't respect each other's authority. I don't even know how they've gotten this far in the first place. Glimmer and Bo lead Adora to a cliff that seems to just drop off, but they jump into the clouds and come back on a floating island that's going to take them to Mystacor. They encourage Adora to jump, but when she does, she catches a glimpse of Shadow Weaver's spy, also making the jump.
This causes Adora to faceplant on the island. Bo asks her what happened, but she denies seeing anything and basically says that everything's fine, pretty much going along with their narrative of she's just tired and needs to relax.
Here's the thing. If something strange catches your attention one time, you think that was strange, but it's probably nothing. If it happens again, that's when you get suspicious. And if it happens a third time, that's when something's definitely going on.
Yeah, there's a problem.
This has been twice now that Adora thinks that she might have seen something weird.
She looked right at it, really. I don't even understand how she could even think that she saw something. She clearly did see something.
Yes, it's a shadow and it's fast moving, but she grew up with a woman named Shadow Weaver. She keeps looking over her shoulder even after they get to Mystacor, so she obviously knows something's wrong, but she's not speaking up, probably because she feels like her friends don't have her back. They're just happy to be at Mystacor, so now they can relax and have a good time. It's sad that Adora was being promoted to Force Captain, but she doesn't believe in herself.
Glimmer says her aunt can be a lot, but that she knows how to handle her, and by that she means lie to her face and be passive-aggressive.
Castaspella greets them, and she's portrayed as the stereotypical cartoon female relative, the one that knits sweaters for the main character and is overly affectionate, but well-meaning, and ends up embarrassing them in front of their friends. We've seen this character so many times before in cartoons. I feel like if this character wasn't even here at all in this episode, not much would really change. She's mostly there for exposition, but I feel like there were probably other ways to have that same exposition, or they could have just made her a queen, like she was in the original.
It's kind of disappointing because in the original she was a queen and an active member of the rebellion, but here she's basically just there for exposition.
And to annoy Glimmer. She says things like, "Glimmer, you're not wearing the sweater I knitted you. You would tell me if you didn't like it, right?" Glimmer says, "Oh, I like it, Auntie. It's just warm out here." We all know, honestly.
Castaspella asks what brings them to Mystacor, and Glimmer says they're on a diplomatic mission to recruit princesses for the Princess Alliance, which is technically a lie. They came here on a whim because they wanted to relax.
They just recruited Entrapta into the rebellion, which was a big deal because now they finally have someone who can provide them with weapons that can stand up to the Horde. But instead of going back to Bright Moon and making plans and communicating, they went to Mystacor to relax. And in the meantime, Entrapta is back in the ruins of her lab, putting that disc back together that made everything go wrong in the last episode. I'm starting to see how the Horde got this far in the first place.
Casta says they've come at a great time because there's a lunar eclipse that night, and she offers them a tour of Mystacor. Adora agrees despite Glimmer's protests, and she takes them along where they eventually come to the lunar lenses, which are responsible for protecting Mystacor from the outside world.
Casta asks Adora if she's going to come to the ceremony tonight, and Glimmer says that she's personally seen the eclipse several times and they want to go to the beach, but she wasn't asking you, Glimmer. Casta says that Adora hasn't seen it, and while they're arguing, Adora sees the shadow again in one of the mirrors.
Adora chases after it and ends up in the Hall of Sorcerers. Casta explains that this area honors Mysticor's great sorcerers, including her brother Micah.
Casta reminisces about how she and her brother used to train in those very halls, and she also comments that Glimmer looks a lot like him. But Glimmer can't let her aunt have a moment, and says she can't look like her father because he had a beard. Glimmer, you don't have to be difficult about every little thing.
Glimmer explains that they're going to use the Princess Alliance to avenge her father, and that her mother believes in them and She-Ra. And then Casta reveals that she and Queen Angela have a complicated relationship, to say the least. Apparently they're not on good terms at all. For example, Queen Angela never responds to Castaspella's letters, and apparently doesn't talk to her at all. It's kind of disappointing because this is the only family that we actually have represented in this show, and they seem pretty dysfunctional.
It seems like Glimmer doesn't have a good relationship with either her mother or her aunt.
And apparently Angela and Castaspella don't get along either.
Castaspella seems to suggest that Angela thinks she's better than her because she's an angelic being, and Casta's just a common sorceress, even though she was a queen in the original, and so was Angela.
She also says some kind of worrying things, like how she believes that Angela isn't feeding Glimmer enough, which is a pretty serious accusation. That would basically be neglect. And I'm surprised that Castaspella would assume such a thing.
She really doesn't think of her sister-in-law in high regards at all. It's never really explained what their issue is with each other. It's just clear that they have issues. It could have been interesting if maybe Castaspella in this version was either a princess or a queen, and they were there to actually recruit her for the rebellion. And maybe because of what happened to Micah, she gave up on the rebellion, and Angela still believes in it, and so that's why they might have beef with each other, because they both lost someone that they cared about, because Casta lost her brother and Angela lost her husband. But instead, it's just not explained, and they're two women who don't like each other.
It's understandable that family doesn't always get along and they fight, but if they're going to include this kind of drama in the show, they might as well do something with it instead of just leaving us hanging as an audience.
They come across a particularly spooky looking statue, and Adora asks about it. Casta explains that it's the statue of Light Spinner, who is a dark spot on Mysticor's history. She was a sorceress who sought power, and she ended up being cast out for it. The others try to continue with the tour, but Adora stays to look at the statue, and she thinks she sees Shadow Weaver's shadow come from it.
Glimmer and Bo catch Adora off guard.
They're excited that it's finally beach time. They see that Adora is visibly upset, and instead of talking about it, they just say it's worse than we thought, and we have to get to the beach right now. This is the 4th time that Adora thinks she's seen something.
These are huge red flags, and yet she continues to ignore them.
She's really needy of her friends. She can't sit down and say, I'm definitely seeing something. Because they're so dismissive of it, she keeps dismissing it too. They finally get to the beach, and Bo and Glimmer try to teach Adora how to relax, but it's not working because 1, she's never relaxed in her life, and 2, she's dealing with this whole being stalked situation. The thing is, this conflict doesn't work because the audience already knows that this is not in Adora's head. This is real. She's actually being followed by something, and we know that Shadow Weaver's after her.
I think this would have worked better if they hadn't revealed that Shadow Weaver was stalking her in the first place, and we were seeing things more from Bo and Glimmer's perspective, and questioning whether this was actually an issue or if it was just in Adora's mind because of some after effects from the virus that affected her and Drill. But instead, it just makes Bo and Glimmer come off as really bad friends because they're constantly dismissive of such a serious situation.
Adora was trying to tell them several times that she thought she saw something, and they kept dismissing it, and now she's visibly upset. It's not going away the whole day. This is still following her, and they just keep dismissing it over and over again. We're constantly told that they're best friends, but after last week's episode where the girls treated Bo so terribly, and now this episode where they're treating Adora terribly, you can't tell us one thing and then show us another.
Since the beach isn't working, Glimmer decides they should go to the steam grotto, which does seem to help Adora a lot, but it's ruined when Shadow Weaver shows up, and this time she's very open about her presence, but only Adora can see see her. She panics and flees from the pool they're in, and she grabs the sword of protection, which she decided to bring into the steam grotto.
Glimmer and Bo confront Adora about her freakout, and she finally sits down and tells them that she's been seeing Shadow Weaver several times now. She has to explain to them who Shadow Weaver is because she hasn't done that yet, even though we're 7 episodes in. Again, they're best friends, but they never really talk about anything to each other. They don't talk about their pasts, really. It's only coming up now. She tells them that Shadow Weaver was her commanding officer, but she was also basically her mother, and they are trying to be supportive, and they tell her that Shadow Weaver might have had control over her in the past, but that's behind her now, and they're in Mystacor, so she can't be here. It's impossible.
The problem is there's no suspense in this scene because we know that Shadow Weaver is there and is stalking her.
So we're just waiting for the confrontation that we know is going to happen. The other thing that bothers me is this whole thing started before they even got to Mystacor.
If this had started happening after they'd already reached the safety, or so-called safety, of Mystacor, this would have been more effective. But we saw it follow them to the land.
And Adora did too. So it just makes Glimmer and Bo look like they want to believe that Shadow Weaver isn't there, so they just do. And they just keep dismissing her concerns over and over again. Bo asks Adora if she wants to go get a massage, and Adora says that she just needs some alone time.
Glimmer and Bo are very comforting to her, but they can't solve all their problems with nice words and hugs.
They leave, but Adora thinks that she hears them talking about her behind her back, saying that she's snapped and she's lost it. So she tries to confront them, but when she goes out there, no one's there. And then she tries to tell herself that she's not crazy.
Adora goes back to Lightspinner's statue and talks to it, saying that it's all in her head and there's nothing there, only to be attacked by Shadow Weaver's shadow. She transforms into She-Ra, and Shadow Weaver takes advantage of the situation.
She makes her hallucinate Catra's voice and Hordak's voice, and his likeness. At least the show has been trying to establish that Catra and Adora have some kind of relationship, even though the execution hasn't been very good. But Hordak's voice tells her that the Horde had such high hopes for her, and she was destined to be Force Captain. But Hordak doesn't even know Adora exists.
Yeah, Hordak never showed any interest in Adora at all, so this is kind of sad.
While she was with the Horde, he never thought about her, noticed her, and after she left the Horde, he couldn't care less that she's gone. He's just business as usual. So this scene kind of made me a little annoyed.
She-Ra ends up destroying a wall of ancient texts in her panic. Castaspella runs in and is understandably distraught over this, and She-Ra reverts back to Adora. She tries to explain herself, but Castaspella isn't really having it, and I understand where she's coming from.
She doesn't know about everything that's been going on.
To her, it's just she invited this young woman into her home, and all of a sudden she destroyed part of it without any explanation or warning. So Glimmer tells her that she can handle her aunt, while Bo tells her that this has gone too far and she needs to sleep.
He tells her straightforward that there's no way the Horde is there.
This is pretty much where my patience has run out. At this point, it's no longer that Adora is on edge. It's now that she has transformed into She-Ra and destroyed something. So this is clearly a very serious situation, yet Bo and Glimmer are still very dismissive of it and just blow it off, continually insisting that she just needs to rest and it's all in her head, and also leave her alone again.
Bo tells her she needs to sleep, so they basically send her to her room by herself, where she can be harassed more.
Stalking is such a serious situation, and it's really shocking that they would be so flippant about it.
They just don't believe her at all. They don't have any trust in her.
So Adora is alone, sulking in her room, when she hears a knock on the door. It turns out to be Glimmer, and she starts saying that she's very upset with Adora and how she's basically ruined everything that she's been working towards, and tells her to just leave. This is obviously not Glimmer. It's Shadow Weaver's minions in disguise. But Adora doesn't know that, so she sulks more.
The Shadow Glimmer tells Adora that she's not a good friend and that she should just leave. Maybe Adora should think about how they're not being very good friends.
This is a minor issue, but Adora's shirt doesn't have the Horde symbol on it at all in this scene. I don't know if she changed her shirt finally, or if they just forgot to draw it, but it's not there.
We'll have to see if she actually did get rid of it, or if it was just an animation error.
You'd think now that she's changed her alliance, she would have gotten different clothes.
I mean, if the Horde symbol was actually removed, then I don't mind it, it's fine, but yeah. I don't know if it was or not.
With this shoddy animation, it's hard to tell. In the meantime, Castaspella has begun the ceremony during the eclipse in order to renew the defenses of Mystacor. Glimmer asks if Adora is going to come, but Bo says that he didn't want to wake her because of how desperately she needs her sleep.
You know, the real Glimmer and Bo aren't that different from the Shadow Glimmer and Bo. Like the ones that Shadow Weaver was using back at the Steam Grotto to try to make Adora think that she was going crazy.
They basically do think that she's crazy. Shadow Weaver attacks the ceremony because of course she does, and everybody finds out that Adora was right all along. It cuts to Adora, who is actually leaving, taking Shadow Glimmer's advice.
There was a point where she was supposed to be Force Captain.
Yet she has such little faith in herself. Despite the fact that she knows what Shadow Weaver is capable of, she still basically believes that she's snapped.
I wonder where she's planning on going. Adora hears screaming and sees that the magic surrounding Mystacor is failing, and she sees Bo approaching her. He tells her that they have to get out of there because the magic protection spell around Mystacor is failing. She tries to reach out to grab his shoulder because she wants more answers, but her hand goes through him.
Only now does she finally realize that something is wrong.
The Shadow Bo tells Adora that everything that's about to happen is her fault, and then disappears. She runs back to the chamber where the ceremony was being held, and she sees that Shadow Weaver has taken out all the sorcerers of Mystacor and Bo and Glimmer, and Shadow Weaver isn't even there. She's just projecting herself from the Fright Zone.
So it's actually pretty impressive on her part. Adora makes it to the lunar lenses and finally comes face to face with Shadow Weaver, who talks to her directly. She lectures her about coming home and also says that no one else will ever understand her, just like how they didn't understand Shadow Weaver when she walked among them as Light Spinner.
In a way, she's not wrong about them not understanding her, considering that they've been brushing her off this whole time. But Adora's not really any better since she treated Bo so terribly in the last episode.
It's really disappointing because this was a really good opportunity to explore Shadow Weaver's character, of her being back in Mystacor and who she was as Light Spinner and how she got corrupted by evil in her pursuit of power, but instead she just goes on and on about Adora again. She's back home, and in the original she knew Castaspella personally, but here she doesn't seem to have any interest in Castaspella at all.
She and Castaspella were both apprenticed to the same master, so it would have been interesting to see Castaspella recognize her too.
Maybe they could have had a duel like they did in the original, but instead everybody else is unconscious for this whole scene.
Adora tries to transform into She-Ra, but it actually doesn't work. Shadow Weaver tells Adora that deep down she knows that it's true, that she's the vicious warrior that she raised her to be, and she tells her that these princesses only want to use her for her powers, which may or may not be true, but either way, Shadow Weaver only wants to use her too, so...
along with the rest of the Horde. Adora defiantly throws Shadow Weaver off of her and stands up to her saying that she only ever wanted to use her and never loved her, and that these were her real friends, except they also blew you off when you were being stalked. So,
she says they've been kind to her, but they haven't been very kind all day. How have they been kind to you, and how have you been kind to them? Adora goes for her sword again, and this time it transforms into a shield without Adora having to say anything. Maybe it just knew what she needed, but kind of makes it seem like she doesn't really have control over it.
She uses the shield to fend off Shadow Weaver by reflecting the light of the moons onto her. She's also able to use this to complete the ceremony that Castaspella started, rejuvenating the magic that protects Mystacor.
Shadow Weaver tells Adora that she was nothing before she found her and she'll be nothing without her, but Adora says she's never coming back and finally breaks Shadow Weaver's spell, so she ends up getting knocked back in the Fright Zone.
Shadow Weaver really needs to understand that it's over and it's not going to happen. Just move on with your life, because this is actually really pathetic.
Everyone wakes up now that everything's over, and Bo actually apologizes to Adora, saying that they've been bad friends, but Glimmer never apologizes, only Bo apologizes. But Adora says, no, this wasn't you, this was Shadow Weaver. She pushes people apart. This is what she does.
Excuse me, you can't blame Shadow Weaver for this. I mean, was it Shadow Weaver's fault that they treated Bo so poorly in the last episode?
Glimmer's the one who decided that Adora just needed rest.
They were dismissing Adora's complaints about seeing something and being followed. They're the ones who decided what was best for Adora.
Adora tried to tell them that she saw something in the woods, but they refused to back her up, so she just dropped it, and she dropped it for pretty much the rest of the episode, until what happened in the Steam Grotto.
Well, even after that, she actually left when Shadow Glimmer told her to.
Because even after they sat down and had that conversation in the grotto, they still refused to believe her. Even though this whole thing started before they got to Mystacor. I understand that they believe that Mystacor is a safe place, but the Whispering Woods are not necessarily free of the Horde, and they know that.
For crying out loud, that's where they met Adora. We've seen some pretty strong friendships in media, and they don't come close. We keep being told that they're so strong in their friendship and how close they are as characters, but the show doesn't actually show us that.
Adora apologizes to Casta, saying that it was her fault that Shadow Weaver was in Mystacor, even though it was really Glimmer's fault because she's the one who had the idea to go to Mystacor in the first place. But Casta says that she saved Mystacor, and she says that she'll knit her a sweater.
I'm really glad that she was able to patch things up with Castaspella, but she did save the entire kingdom in the end, so...
The three of them finally get to go to the beach, and Adora's able to relax, but I still don't feel like this is enough to patch things up. They really need to address these issues directly, and stop dismissing them and saying it was someone else's fault.
No one takes responsibility in this show.
Back in the Fright Zone, Catra goes to see what's going on with Shadow Weaver, and she sees that she's been defeated. And she says,
"You've been going about this the wrong way, old woman.
If you want to get to Adora, you have to go through the heart." Bo shows up in the cauldron. So now she's going after Adora? I thought she was on Hordak's side with this. This show has some decent concepts, but I feel like we've seen them done before in other shows, and we've seen them done better.
For example, there was an episode of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, another reboot of a classic 80s property, where the main character, Twilight, realizes she hasn't sent a letter to her mentor in a week and decides that she has to send one at least once every week. All of her friends blow this off because they see it as trivial and an expectation that she's putting on herself when no one told her that was the case. It's understandable why they would feel that way, because it does seem like a very insignificant thing, but Twilight ends up pretty much having a mental breakdown over it. She literally snaps, and the episode ends up resolving when all of her friends realize that even though they thought it was trivial, Twilight thought it was really important and they should have respected that and been there for their friend.
And they could have helped her work through it instead of just blowing her off and expecting her to not see it as a problem. They could have tried to help her see that it was actually okay and she was putting extra stress on herself that she didn't need, and been a supportive friend.
The other characters in the main 6 actions are completely understandable because we know that Twilight is overreacting. The problem is, in this situation, it's not just sending a letter, it's that she's being stalked, and the other characters don't take that seriously, and that's very concerning.
They're constantly blowing off her concerns when they know that she's had a difficult past.
And instead of really being there for her, they keep dismissing it by saying that she's just stressed and needs to relax.
They're even dismissing information that they personally know, like they know that the Horde has been in the Whispering Woods before, but they don't care about that because they've decided that it doesn't matter.
Overall, this episode was really disappointing in its lack of world building and missed opportunities, along with the very serious central conflict that wasn't handled properly by the main characters.
And the terrible friendships that we've seen. It's just so disappointing.
But that was just our thoughts on the episode. Feel free to let us know what you think. If you like this video and want to see more, feel free to subscribe to our channel. We're officially halfway through season 1 of Netflix's She-Ra. We hope you have a great new year, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.
Bye.